Okay, so I'm back. So off camera, what I did was went ahead and finished everything up. I got the CDI box put back together back there after the stuff that I showed you about the ground being shorted out and all that. I soldered everything together, covered everything up, and it cranks over fine now. But it doesn't want to start good. I checked it is getting spark on all three cylinders, but it's not wanting to start. It's getting fuel. And so I took the carburetors off, as you can see down there, and I brought them over here. Now, I wanted to make a quick video showing you how to do pop-off pressure. So when I check this, from everything I've been finding out, everybody says around 24, 25 PSI is a good pop-off pressure for this ski and for these carburetors for it to run correctly. And so what I did was I took these off. Now, I went ahead and built my own pop-off pressure gauge, and let me show you what I did here. I just went to Lowe's and I got a 100 psi gauge. I wanted a 60, they didn't have it. Try and get this thing to focus for you here. That's 100. I wanted a 60, but it's okay. It still reads pretty good. It reads all the way up to, down to 10 and 20 and whatever. But you get you a fitting for your hose, a T, and then they have a Schrader valve in the same area that you get the gauge at Lowe's. I imagine Home Depot and Menards would have it as well. And I got me to put pressure into this with, and this Schrader valve. You can get a bicycle pump, and you can just pump it up a couple of times, and you'll see this pressure gauge rise as the pressure goes up. Now, what I did to make it a little easier on myself was I went ahead. I had an old car tire inflator that plugs into your cigarette lighter. I went ahead and cut the leads off, and I put me 2 alligator clips to hook it to my battery. You can do it, hook it to a car or whatever. And I also went ahead and wired in a toggle switch, so I can just turn this thing off and on, and that way to put pressure into that. Now, when you're doing this pressure, I know they say you're supposed to do one carburetor at a time, and that's fine and dandy, that'll work. But pressure is pressure. What I'll do is I'll hold the other two, these little needle valves here, so they go up and down, and that's when that comes up is when the pressure goes off. And so what I did is I hold these two down, and all I did was get a socket, and I set a socket on each one that I wasn't testing, right on top of that little gauge, or any little thing that's kind of heavy, and that'll hold that pressure gauge down, this little pressure, a needle valve down, so it won't come up like that, right? And so those two sockets hold that one down so I can test that one. And then I'll move this over, and then I'll test this one. And then I'll move this over, then I'll test that one. And I've already tested all these, and I've already made the adjustments. So now what you want to do, so this first one was it's popping off right around 30, 32, 33 PSI. This one's popping off around 27, and this one's popping off around 30. So you want these to be as close to pop as you can to the same. You want them all to be, if it's 25, then you want them all to be within 25 or really close to 25. And it's almost impossible to get them all three exactly the same. That's why they talk about these cars being hard to adjust, because they are. But I got them all within a PSI, 1 pound PSI of each other. And ideally, when you put the pressure in there, you'd want to see them all three pop at the same time. Well, these three do that. Two of them will pop almost exactly full pressure, and the third one will be about halfway because it loses pressure, so it can't fully pop. But they pop close enough, so they're all three very, very close. And then what we're going to do, so when you take this out here, right under here is a little spring. Now, how you want to adjust that? If you pick PSI, let's say, like I said, this one was 35. Well, I wanted to get down to 25. So what I did was I cut just a half, and I'll see if I can find it. I'll show you. No, I don't see it. What I did was I cut a half a spring off, just a half of a. You got one round, right? So you just want to cut one half off. So I use these little small cutters here. You can see how small they are. They're real tiny, and even those are almost too big. So you want some really small cutters, and you'll cut. If it's off 10 PSI, I'd cut a half. If it's off, say, 5 PSI, I'd cut it like an eighth or a fourth. You want to cut smaller increments at a time off, because if you cut too much off, then you're going to have to stretch the spring. So Now that gets into the situation, let's say this one had been 15 PSI instead of 25. Well, then I'd either try to, if I didn't have a new kit with me, which I don't yet, I would just stretch the spring a little bit, if you know what I mean. Just kind of stretch it, and barely stretch it just a little bit. Don't stretch it much or you'll mess it up. Just stretch it a little bit and then put it back in and try it. And so that's how you adjust them. And it's not that bad, it really isn't. So I'll show you now what I've got. And you can use WD-40 for this. All I have is fogging oil. And so you'll fill each one of these. Well, first, let me plug it all in here. See if I can do this with one hand. Just put your tire gauge on there or your pump, whatever you got. Put it on that Schrader valve that goes into your little T there. All right, so you can see there I put it on right here. So what I'll do now is I'll put a little oil down each one of these, and I'll stand back and I'll let you watch this. And you'll see them all three pretty much go off at the same time. Now remember, they might not go off exactly at the same, but you're looking for the sudden pop, and the two of them will go off and the third one will start bubbling quite a bit, and sometimes they all three go off exactly the same. That means they're really, really close. At the same time you're doing that, you'll want to watch your gauge back there. And if you can see my gauge back here in the background right over here. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn this on, and you should watch them all three pretty much at the same time. And watch the gauge. Did you catch that? They all three went off at the same time that time, which is good. That's what you want. They sprayed oil everywhere. And if they didn't, the third one went off like a millisecond behind. So that's perfect. That's what you want. Now those are tuned, and I can put them back in the ski now, and it'll have the right, when you try to, these skis here, these 1100s, with these 1100 engines, they're really bad for bogging on takeoff. And one of the reasons is that very reason right there. They get out of adjustment. You know, some people say you can take the needle jet out and move it up to a bigger size, and I may do that later. But I'm going to see how this runs for now. And I'm going to go ahead and put these back together now and get everything done, and I'll get back with you in a little while here. Something I forgot to tell you. Now, when you're hooking this up, your hose here for your pressure or your pop-off tester, when you're hooking this up, this line coming out of your tester is going to go into your input on the side of your if you got a single carb or your triple carb, whatever, it's going to go into your input. All right. Now, air will leak out of your output here, down here. You know, that's your return line. It goes back into your fuel tank. So you'll want to plug that off too. Now for my carb, I've got another line back here, and this is called your pulse line. This line here is what comes off the engine for vacuum to operate these CV slides back here. So I have to plug all three of those off in order for this to work correctly. If you don't, it won't work correctly. So you won't get so make sure you hook that up right. Remember, this coming off your pressure gauge, your pop-off valve tool has to go into the input. And then the other two just gets plugged off, or if you only got one, it gets plugged off. And that's all there to it. All right, guys, I got everything put back together, and I cranked it up once there. Sounds pretty good. I'm going to turn it on here. You may want to turn your volume down a little bit because it might be quite loud.
Go for it.
All right, so now that we got all the other stuff lined out on it, and it's running good. The nice thing is on these 1100s, they don't like to start when they're cold. And when they're brand new, they'll start okay, but as they're getting older, they start to, you know, crank, and it won't start. So a lot of people put some primer on it, and that's what we're going to do today. So I got this little kit, and I'm going to show you how to put it on. It's actually really simple. So here's your pump. Now, if you'll see the oil come out of that center hole there, that hole right there, there's two holes. The one in the center is the one you'll be sending to the carburetors. This one here is one you'll be the line coming in from your return line. So the way we do this, I put mine inside this hole here. Some people put them up here. I don't like that. You put them down here, it's out of the way. You only have to use it once, maybe like when it's really cold. If it's been started in a couple of days, you'd be able to use this. So then we'll put it down in there, make it easy to do. So the first thing I like to do, take the nuts off of it in the washer. Then I'll go ahead and get my location. I use it's just plastic. So I kind of go back in this corner back here so it makes it easy to get to.
Right, channel. You don't need all that.
I feel hold that in there. Alright. And then, if that hole's not big enough, then what we'll do is, we'll go back with a bigger bit, which I got right over here. And you can use a little, whatever bit you want to use, a wood bit, one of these type bits, a Forstner bit, whatever kind of bit you want to use, you can use to put in that. It doesn't matter. 'Cause all we're trying to do is make that hole bigger enough to get that down in there. And I like to reach through here so I can find it. If I can't see it, which I can't. All right. Okay. And now we'll make sure this fits. You may have to push on it a little bit. I like to make mine just a tad smaller so that it yeah, see that, you heard that popping? It makes it a little hard to go in there. And I'll show you that it looks down in there. I mean it's out of the way, nobody sees it. So that's how it looks. Now you just reach in there and pump it a couple times. We'll show you that when we get it all put together. So now I'll pull it back out. I made it tight so that I can't pull it out. That's good though, that's what we want. I screw it out. Those screws right there. So what I used was a 3/4 spade bit, and that's just perfect for you to be able to use these threads to screw down in there, and that makes a real good seal on it. So now, next thing we got to do in this kit here, make sure when you buy one of these that these fittings here are made of brass. The one that comes on the fuel line, that you want brass for this one, and I'll show you where that goes. Now, there's two rules. A lot of people want to cut the line that comes in. In other words, this line here, that's called your from your tank into your carburetor. That's your input line. A lot of people cut that and put it into that. That's wrong, because what that can do, if that starts leaking, it can cause air to get into your system, and what'll happen is it'll cause your cylinder to run lean, and that can cause you to damage your motor. You put it in the return line, the fuel coming from the carburetor back to the fuel tank, then if this little thing starts leaking, anything leaks anywhere, your engine's still safe. You got all the worst case scenario, you lose a little fuel. So that's what we'll do. We'll find the return line. So we know that's not it. This is it right here. Making sure that it is. I'm gonna, yeah, that's it right there.
Show them where they lead sticking out there.
That's so if you look over here, this is your return line back here. I don't know if you can see that. That's the return line right here. That's what you want to cut. So what we'll do, we'll snip that in half. And you can put that T anywhere you want to, up out of the way, hidden, whatever you want to do. It really doesn't matter. It's not a big deal. Now, there's going to be some glass spill out. Don't let that worry you. Just make sure there's no sparks nowhere. Because that's under pressure. If you ain't run your ski in a while, it probably won't leak out. But I just ran mine a few days ago, and so that's why. Now, what I like to do is go ahead and put this line here on there so that fuel will stop leaking, and we can cut this line to length later. All we're trying to do is get this fuel from stop coming out there. And there we go. Now we got a good safe connection there. Not much fuel leaked out. So yeah, make sure there's no sparks when you do this nowhere. You know, don't be smoking a cigarette or anything like that when you do it. Alright, so now I'll just use a couple of zip ties. You can use a couple of small clamps if you want, it doesn't matter. But what you're gonna do is seal this line back onto that little brass fitting. Get it as tight as you can. You know what? Looks like I missed that just a tad. Let's redo that. Let's try that again. This brass fitting is kind of loose on this. That's why you want to put a clamp on it. Make sure that it stays on good. You can use a zip tie or a clamp, either one. It doesn't really matter. All right. Yeah, I think that'll work. All right. And then lastly, this kit comes with little small zip ties for the little bitty lines. You don't want to try to use a big zip tie on that little bitty line. You ain't gonna get a very good seal. It seals pretty good without a zip tie, but I'm gonna go ahead and put one on anyway. You probably don't really have to have one down here, but I do it anyway. And I just pull till it breaks. The little tab will break off here in a second. If I can get in there, that is. I'll have to use pliers, but that's all right. Just like that. Alright, that can go back down in there, and if you want to zip tie it up to something, that's fine too. Now we're just going to kind of get a rough estimate. I like to give myself plenty of room for the for this. If I have to take this primer out to work on it for whatever reason, so I give myself a room before I cut this line. I'll show you what I mean here. If I want to work on that primer, I want to be out here a little bit. So I usually give myself, you know, something like that. So I'll cut it right there. Now, before I put that on there, what I'm going to want to do, two things. One, I want to make sure that washer nut is on those lines. So what I'm going to do, so now we know this center line goes out to the carburetors. That's what we're going to put on here.
Show them what you just did, Bobby.
I just pushed it on that center, that one there, the center one that goes out to the carburetors. That's what we want. I just pushed it right on there. Put one of these little clamps on it. Now you want to drop this hose down, back down through the hole, because that goes to your carburetor. We'll cut that to length here in just a few minutes. You can do this job in just a few minutes. It doesn't take long at all. Now remember, we got to put our nut on before you do anything else. What you want to do, take both lines here. This is the one coming from the return line. This big one goes to your carburetor. And thread this up on there, both of these. It's got a washer. Like that. Let's see here, hang on just a minute. Get them untangled here a little bit. So here, put your nut on it. Run this stuff down. I might have put them on backwards. I did. I put it on backwards. So that's all right. Remember, we all make mistakes. We're gonna turn it over. Nuts gotta go on first on this line, then the washer, because we're gonna go up on it. And this line's already on, so we're gonna run. These things untangle. So we're gonna run it through that way. It don't matter how you do it. This is the way I do it. I guess sometimes I make things more complicated than it needs to be. But anyway, you get the point. Put your washer nut on it. Now, here's this. Run this one up now and put it onto the thing. Now, let me make sure I got everything right before I put that last zip tie on. Yeah, so that'll go up on there and tighten up. So what we'll do with that last zip tie on that line there, that's the line that this line comes from your return line. So it goes on the side. In other words, it draws in, and then that middle one pumps out. And we'll show you that here in just a minute. You'll be able to see it. And I'll show the difference it makes too when these things started. I hear people say that if you have to put these on, there's something wrong. And that's not necessarily true, and I'll tell you why. Because as these carburetors get old, even though if you rebuild them, you rebuild the pump and everything, the engine gets old and all these things. I guess you replace everything on it. You may not have to put one of these on, but it's been my experience you do. The 1100s are hard to crank over when they ain't been running a while. They don't get a lot of fuel or something. I don't know what the point. Problem is, maybe the fuel pump's too weak. I don't know. So now, we're going to take this washer and nut, run it up on there and tighten it down, and that'll be done for that part of it. And I'll show you what to do here in a minute too.
I'm gonna give it a cut. I'm gonna cut real quick while you do that.
I was looking for the screws. Go for it. All right, we got this put back on, and I know some of you are probably saying, "Hey, he didn't put his flame arresters back in," but I actually went back and did it. I didn't bolt it down. I saw them laying over here, and I said, "Oh yeah." Anyway, they're in there, and this is on good and tight. And what I like to do here, here's our hose. I just stick it on there because it goes pretty good and tight, and there's not a lot of pressure. Now you can put a zip tie on that if you want to. I don't, and here's why. Because I can pull it back off if I have to. That's why. There's not enough pressure to take that off. Now you can check that, and see, make sure it's not coming loose. If it's coming loose, it's on pretty tight. But if it's coming loose, you may want to put something on it because you don't want, air sucking in there or whatever. I don't think it will anyway. Now, before we start it, let me zip tie this up because I like to get it out of the way. And then I'm going to show you the difference with how this thing will start with and without that on there. So all I'm doing here is just kind of getting these plastic hoses up out of the way, and I want to tighten them up, zip tie them up here to something else. That's all, nothing big, nothing fancy. I mean, if you want to make it look great, that's okay, you can do that. That's all we do. Now, so I'm going to show you. So what we're going to do, I'm not going to prime it. I'm just going to crank it and see if it'll start with a choke and like you normally should, you know what I mean? So that's what we're going to do, and then I'll show you what'll happen once we do prime it. Now it may start, it may surprise me. I really don't, I'm not looking that it will though. I don't think it will. So what we'll do is we'll pull the choke. Now remember the primer's down there, so we're not going to prime it. See what I mean? These are really hard where they've been sitting for a while. They won't hardly do it. Now, we're going to try something different. We're going to take the choke off, because if you have the choke on and you prime that, well, the fuel can't squirt down in the carburetor because your choke flap is up, right? So it won't go down in there as well. So we're just going to watch this tube here. We're going to pump it a few times.
You never put your choke down.
Yeah, I'll just show it. So make sure your choke's down. So we're just going to pump it a few times. See that fuel squirting through there? 4 or 5 pumps is all you need. That's it. That's all you need. Now watch the difference. I'm not even going to choke it. There you go. It took a minute to get warmed up there. You know, they're a little cold natured, but you saw the difference. They won't hardly start at all, man, unless you put the primer kits on it. And that's why I put those on there. I'm just putting this on it. It was off. These are easy to put on, but those are easy. Those primer kits are easy to put on, and they make a world of difference, man. And you only have to do that. Like if you ain't run it today or a day or two, you'll have to use that primer once. The rest of the day, it should start right back up. Like I'll show you. Well, we'll let it set for a minute, and then I'll show you.
Go.
All right, so it's been setting for a few minutes. You can see there's no fuel in this line. So the fuel, like I said, after you get done using the primer, there's no more fuel comes through that. It only comes through there when you pump it. So it's been setting for a few minutes. I wanted to show you that you don't have to keep using the primer. Once you start that day, he'll start right back up. And that's all there are to it. I'll be with you in a minute. I want to show you something else in just a couple minutes, but we're going to cut for a few minutes.